Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Digital Transformation and Enterprise Cloud Summit. Today's event was organized by the hardworking folks at Redmond Magazine and Virtualization and Cloud Review, who have brought together some of the best independent experts on today's topic. Many thanks to our sponsor, Nutanix, for making this event possible. And thanks to you for joining us. I'm John K. Waters, Editor-in-Chief in the Converge 360 group of 1105 Media, and I'll be your moderator for the first of three information-packed sessions. But before we get started today, I need to go over a few housekeeping details. Each of today's sessions is being recorded for later access. Keep an eye out for an email with a link to that recording. It'll be coming your way within the next few days. Each of today's sessions will be followed by a 5 to 10 minute Q&A. You can type your questions into the Q&A box at any time. Please feel free to add your questions as they occur to you throughout the summit. We'll do our best to get to all of them. Our sponsor, Nutanix, has provided some extra resources that can be found on the right-hand side of your screen. Be sure to take a minute to check those out. And at the end of the summit, you'll be asked to take a very short survey. Sorry for the bother, but please take a moment to share your honest opinions. Our editors actually read every comment. I'm one of them, so I know it's true. Their opinions help to shape our future events. And last but not least, at the end of the third session, one lucky attendee will be receiving a Microsoft Surface Pro 8. But you must be present to win, so stick with us. And now let's get started with our first session, Digital Transformation and the Modern Cloud Enterprise. For this session, we called on technologist, content creator, and senior resultant, Howard M. Cohen. In his 40-plus years in the IT industry, Howard has held senior executive positions in many of the top channel partner organizations, and he currently writes for and about the IT channel. He is a sought-after speaker and insightful observer of the technology landscape and one of our favorite presenters. I know you're in for a great session. Take it away, Howard.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, John. Always starts my morning with a smile. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Digital Transformation and the Modern Cloud Enterprise. You can almost be assured that that title was written by a marketer who took two very popular phrases that are constantly being used and smacked them together to form the title for this session. What I'd like to do is take that title back apart. And I'd like to start with digital transformation. This has been beaten to death over the years. But I'd like to share with you my definition of digital transformation for two reasons. One, because I think it gets closer to what we all really accomplish. And number two, because it's the definition I'll be using in the context of today's presentation. So what exactly is a digital transformation? And some people think this is an illustration of digital transformation. We started out crouching down. We stood erect finally, and then now we're crouching down again. What's old is new again, except now we have smartphones, tablets, or computers in front of us. I certainly think that archaeologists of the future will find this amusing because it's probably true, but it is not a digital transformation. It's simply evolution. Many people think that digital transformation is installing new computers, new technology, new hardware. That's just an upgrade. That's all it is. It's not a digital transformation. It's an upgrade. So, and it's good. It's always good to refresh your technology, get the benefit of the best technology on the market, but it's not a digital transformation. Here's my definition of digital transformation. It's not so much about technology as it is about people, as it is about how people apply technology to what they do, to how they live, work, and play, to make those things better, to make the work things happen faster, to make them more enjoyable, to eliminate errors from them. Once you've got the technology doing all the repetitive work, all the grunt work, if you will, you're freed up to do much more interesting and fulfilling things. Now, this is something we talk to employers about all the time. Free your people up. Let them do the really interesting work that requires the imagination of a human being. but I think we can apply it to ourselves as well. You want to do digital transformation wherever and whenever you can, because it's meant to make things better. And it's more about you than it's about tech. Okay, let's focus in on the word modern. This is a word that I have a lot of trouble with. And I'll show you what. By the way, this is today's word. I know many of you who've been at my sessions before, and I want to thank you for coming back. But you know that I like to start each session with a word. And today's word, obviously, is modern. What is modern? Well, I'm sure you would all consider this architecture to be modern. Some of you would consider it to be weird. But it's modern architecture. You'd probably also look at this as being modern architecture. And this is way more than 50 years old. So it's retained that modern appeal. As has this, the Guggenheim Museum in New York, famously architected by Frank Lloyd Wright. It's one of the world's most iconic buildings, but no matter how old it gets, it just seems to stay modern. It's amazing. Back in the 18th century, this was considered modern. This is Independence Hall in Philadelphia. A couple of interesting documents came out of there. Back when it was built, this was a modern building. Not so much today. When Rembrandt and Leonardo da Vinci were around in the time of the Renaissance, 15th century, this was considered modern architecture. In the 12th century, this was considered modern architecture. Now it's just considered whoops. And back in the 1st century AD, yeah, the Colosseum was brand spanking new. It was considered incredibly modern. They did not have vendors selling cotton candy and beer. But today, we see this as an antiquity. There's thoroughly modern Millie. There's modern love, which I won't even comment about. Charlie Chaplin brought us Modern Times, which somehow or other resulted in Modern Times beer. There's modern art. There's other people's interpretation of modern art. And then, of course, our good friends at Microsoft gave us the modern UI. Originally called the Metro UI, they renamed it. They renamed it the modern UI. And, well, I guess it's not modern anymore because they've now stopped using it. It's now called retired. Modern UI, modern. So what I'm trying to convey in all of this is that the concept of modern is relative. It's relative to the times. It's relative to how things change over time. What's modern today may be old hat a year from now, 10 years from now, 1,000 years from now. It's very unpredictable. Okay. Here's the modern enterprise. Well, no, that is the latest bridge of the latest enterprise on television. This one was supposed to be even more modern. It's further in the future, but it doesn't look as modern. Modern enterprise. This one was after the first one, and my God, it looks primitive. It looks like a star cave. Modern. And this, of course, was the bridge of the original enterprise, supposedly about 100-something years from now. Looks military, not modern. So what is a modern enterprise? Well, rather than try to even define it, let's just push on to the modern cloud enterprise, because that's really what's important to us, right? The modern cloud enterprise. Okay. I went looking for a definition of modern cloud enterprise, that phrase, because I was curious to see how other people would define it, but I wasn't sure that I had a good definition for it. I'll show you some of what I found when I was trying to find the modern cloud enterprise. HatSnap is a company that tells us that A modern cloud enterprise is a company at the leading edge of generating and making sense of data. Okay. They know how to use data to help them ask the right questions, attract and retain the top talent, and future-proof their businesses by having a data-oriented mindset. It kind of wanders around a bit, but they hit a lot of really important points. If you're not using data as the foundation of your business, I want to know who you are, because it seems to me that data today is the foundation of everybody's business. And those who learn to wield their data better tend to be far more competitive and tend to win faster. And that involves attracting and retaining top talent, although the talent is not the talent it used to be. We'll dive into that a little more. So PackSnap has given us what I consider to be a very interesting definition. Next up is SnapLogic. And they mention the concept of visibility. Let me submit to you that a modern cloud enterprise that doesn't maintain full visibility of all its data entities is a modern cloud enterprise in trouble. Without visibility, we don't know where our data assets are. And since our data assets are the most valuable assets we own, from a fiduciary standpoint, that's almost criminal. It's crucial to maintain full visibility of all data entities, wherever they may be. Are they in appropriate storage? Are they stored in an appropriate fashion? Are they accessible to the right people? So many things. Now, especially when we're using software-defined storage, that gets to being even more critical, because our data exists in pieces distributed throughout the cloud environment. Now, yes, we use the data to meet our business needs, to help run our businesses, to help us make better decisions and get to market faster. I agree with that. And we also use data to improve customer experiences. We learn more about our customers. We learn how to target our marketing and our messaging at those customers. And you'd think, what does this have to do with a modern cloud enterprise? But realistically, it's the fact that you have the agility that a modern cloud enterprise gives you. You have all these different cloud services. You can pick and choose which ones you want. If one doesn't serve you the way you want, you can get rid of it and get another one really quickly. That flexibility, that ability to move between applications and get the results you're looking for, that's predicated on having a modern cloud enterprise that uses data as its foundation. Another company, Azul. Okay, Azul seems to like the popular marketing phrases. The journey requires us to embrace software and leverage the cloud as a key driver of competitive advantage. Okay, that's probably all true. To me, it doesn't say much. All those things are true. But what's more important that Azul shared with us is that while it creates incredible opportunities, it also creates issues, challenges. There's stability challenges, certainly resilience challenges. There are enormous security challenges. It takes quite a bit to secure a cloud environment. Imagine securing many of them into a modern cloud enterprise. So I felt it was valuable to share that, because that point is that it's a double-edged sword. There's a lot of good to be had, but you've got to be careful to completely prepare yourself for the potential bad. And remember also, you're becoming dependent upon services delivered from elsewhere. You need a contingency plan for each and every one of them. That takes time, but it's crucial. Then there's Wing. And Wing gave us three characteristics for a modern cloud enterprise. Here we go. Well, number one is not surprising. Wing tells us that a modern cloud enterprise is built on data. Now, we've already talked about that. Indeed, it is built on data. Data is the foundation of a modern, it's the foundation of any enterprise today. You know, you've got to marshal your data. You've got to master your data. Know what you have and know how to best use it. That's what gave rise to data science. So a lot of what we do in a modern cloud enterprise is around managing that data. Wing introduces the idea that it's powered by artificial intelligence. I'll take a certain amount of issue with that. Certainly, any cloud infrastructure benefits from having AI integrated into its management. There are many things we can do using AI that help us manage cloud environments faster, smarter. No question about it. Does that mean that AI is powering them, or is that just an overstatement? I think it's an overstatement. Also suffice it to say that AI is being used in more and more applications running in a modern cloud enterprise. So yeah, AI is a big player. I just don't know that it is the primary player. I don't know that it matters. Wing also tells us that a modern cloud enterprise is an agile workplace now. There are so many ways that agile is defined. One good definition that's obviously true is that you have great agility in the software that you use. You don't have to order different hardware. You don't have to reconfigure anything. You really just need to start a subscription and spin up a new session of whatever software you want to use. Yes, you need some planning for it. That's operational. But really, it's incredibly easier to just request resources in a cloud than it is to build them in your own data center. So there's that agility. Most everybody who's working in a cloud environment is building cloud-native software using microservices in containers. And they're doing so using an agile methodology for developing software. Instead of a long-term plan that stretches out into the future, they do everything in sprints. They deliver a version of the software. It is not the ultimate version. It's a version along the way. Ops deploys it and quickly gathers feedback from the users, brings it back to the developers, and they issue another and another and another. And over time, they're continuously achieving improvement by continuously developing, delivering, and deploying new software. So, yeah, that's taking place in most every cloud enterprise today. So, yeah, I think Wing gave us three very good characteristics of a modern cloud enterprise. I'll stop. Okay. There's my AI interrupted. Here's TechGenix. They gave us four characteristics. The first of which has a multi-cloud architecture. Oh boy. Okay. From my perspective, it's not required that a modern cloud enterprise have a multi-cloud architecture, but it is incredibly likely. I mean, what is multi-cloud? It's simply using more than one of the same kind of cloud. And if you take the big three hyperscalers, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, a lot of companies are using two or three of them. There are alternatives to them. They're using those too. Why? Because each of those cloud platforms has a service they want. They are literally shopping around for the services they want to get the most efficient, high-performing service at the best possible cost. Makes sense. So let's take the magic out of multi-cloud. Multi-cloud is almost a given. And it's present in most every modern cloud enterprise, but not necessarily a given. Okay? Virtualization, again, another thing that, when you say virtualization, everybody's mind snaps to server virtualization, right? We think about having a virtualized server with multiple VMs and virtual machines, and you can have lots of different tenants in there, all sharing one physical server device. That's what gave rise to cloud, make no mistake. The ability to share a physical server with more than one customer made it possible to achieve the economies that made cloud so attractive. Prior to that, years before there was cloud, there was something called the Application Service Provider Program, ASP. And companies went into business being ASPs. And their gig was they had a server. They connected you to their server using a long line or using the internet. And now you were paying, you were still paying for that server because you knew they were going to pass the cost along to you. Now you're also paying for the connection, and you're paying them for their service. And what you get is the same server functionality you had when the server was at your place. The ASP initiative was a horrendous failure. There was no economy to it. Then came virtualization. Now you could have a dozen different customers share one server and share the cost of that server. You can have 50. These days you can have hundreds. They can all share one physical server, share the cost of that server, which is a fraction, and it becomes worthwhile for them. They can get rid of most of the services. They can get rid of powering their equipment, cooling their equipment, maintaining their equipment, managing. They get rid of all of that, and they get to cloud. And all of it was started by the presence of virtualization. Now, of course, in the cloud, the virtualization is taking place at the cloud data center, not yours. So you're not really using server virtualization as much as you used to. You are, however, using storage virtualization. Even if you're using it in the cloud, that storage is virtualized into a logical unit that makes sense for you. It doesn't necessarily match the physical infrastructure that's being used to power it. You also make use of desktop virtualization, especially as we recognize that mobility is an essential component of a modern cloud enterprise. The virtual desktop interface, the virtual desktop infrastructure, two ways of defining VDI, makes it possible to give everybody devices on a relatively slow connection with relatively little memory, moderate processing. The software's not running on the device. Your users are all over the place, but the software's not running on their devices. It's running in the cloud. And all they're seeing is the screen appearances. Many of us make use of VDI these days to make applications seem like they're local, because all that's traveling the wire is that screen appearance and the key clicks, the mouse movement. So you're making a lot of use of virtualization when you go mobile. Also, in terms of mobility, as we move forward, that's going to become standard. It's going to become the way we do things. You're going to see desktops pretty much fade away in the world. In business, I think they're fading away even now. More and more people see it making sense to have a laptop. First of all, we're all working at home part-time, working in the office part-time, or at least 2/3 of us are. Why not have a laptop? Why maintain multiple machines? We're also seeing it become more and more possible to do real work on tablets and even smartphones. So mobility will go from being a special branch of computing to being computing. It'll be the de facto standard. Now, TechGenics also threw in machine learning, the ability of a machine to ingest data and form inferences based on the data that it ingests. Part of artificial intelligence, and I'll agree, A lot of applications use it. It certainly is being put to use to help manage cloud environments. Again, not a requirement. I think we can find many modern cloud enterprises that aren't yet using AI or ML. So don't feel like you're behind the times if you're not. You could say that you're preparing for it, because eventually it'll become something that you need or want to augment what you're doing. It'll become useful to you. And that really should be the arbiter of what you add into any cloud environment. Okay, next up, Forbes gave us five characteristics of modern cloud enterprise. First one is process continuity. And what they're trying to say is that when you move your workflow into a cloud environment and you're using automation to perpetuate it, first of all, the processes that are automated happen. They're continuous. Nothing really needs to stop them. The processes that are performed by people, there too, the system is monitoring, making sure that it gets done on time. And if it doesn't, it's notifying a successive stream of people until somebody gets the job done. So it reinforces and promotes process continuity. You're also using all of the same technology to do many other things. So you get incredible cross-functionality. You're performing, when you talk about the world of doing more with less, cloud is ideal. Most of the hardware is general purpose. Very few bespoke items in the cloud environment. So you're getting incredible cross-functionality between applications, between users, and so forth. A focus on the customer and employee experience. Wow. This does relate to cloud. This does relate to modern cloud enterprise. First of all, the employee experience. Why are we automating processes? Why are we using workflow automation? We're using it to take the scut work away from people. We talked about that before. Why give the menial tasks to people, the repetitive tasks? Let the technology take care of that. That should improve that employee's experience of the job. When they're focusing on more interesting, more fulfilling work, hopefully that's improving the employee's experience. Otherwise, right? And of course, we're using all kinds of technology. We're using all of that artificial intelligence and machine learning to promote a better customer experience. We're learning more about the customers and putting it to use by interpreting it with AI and action that with our cloud. Recommender engines. Compare your customer base to your product base, determine which of your products would be interesting to which of your customers, and send out marketing material on it. All AI. No human intervention until the customer calls back and says, hey, sell me something. Powerful. A much better customer experience. A much more automated one, but it leads to a personal one. So exciting development in all the directions we really want to be moving. Another major component of both the operation of your cloud environment and the applications that run on it, analytics. You'll have analytics all over the place in a modern cloud enterprise. You'll have analytics examining your use of the cloud and determining how you can do better, who your top talkers are, where you seem to have people using your cloud that you don't know. That's got to be challenged. Applications that analyze your business and how your different regions are doing, your different products are doing, how profitable customers are, all kinds of analytics. It's the reason you turn to cloud. It's the reason you turn to compute. And in a modern cloud enterprise, it's the analytics that make us better. So yeah, that's key element of a modern cloud enterprise. This is the first time that any of them mentioned cost. I know I mentioned it a little bit earlier by chance, but this is the first mention of it that any of them brought up, and that's very different for me. Usually when I start to research a particular topic to see other people's perspectives, the first thing that comes out is the importance of controlling costs. It's foremost on most everybody's mind, and well, it should. The economics of the thing are very, very important. And really, when you talk about cloud, I mentioned before, the agility of cloud says you can go shopping. You can use a service from Amazon, and then somebody can say, well, Microsoft has the same service, but it also does this and this, and it costs less. You'll switch. This is one of the reasons that I tell clients that it's important to have a financial manager on your cloud team. Somebody has got to be shopping for a better deal because there are always better deals. So use that agility to shop for the best possible service at the best possible cost. And continue doing that because it can only bring your costs down. And that's your job. So I think Forbes gave us some extremely good thoughts to focus on when building our modern cloud enterprise. Another consultancy that gave us 5 is West Monroe Consulting. I was interested by these. These are much more politically and people-oriented, if you will. They talk about the right level of voice and leadership in the organization. And I'm going to put the second bullet up there with it, the right organizational structure. What I get out of this is that, in my own experience, one of the reasons consultants get brought in, and one of the reasons that the IT department in any organization should have a seat at the table, is that those of us on the technology side know what's out there. We know what technologies are emerging. We know which technologies are performing. We're constantly consuming reviews and talking to people about their experiences with various software products. When the company starts to talk strategically at the highest C levels, having somebody there from the cloud group means you have somebody there who can take what you're talking about and apply technologies to it. Now, what does that sound? Yeah, it's the thought work that goes into a digital transformation. They can imagine digital transformations you can perform to make the things you want to do happen. If they're not there, you don't know what's possible because nobody else has the time to study all that, to keep on top of all that. For technologists, for consultants, for IT departments, part of their job. So bring them to the table. Let them listen in to the strategic planning that's going on. And give them a voice in how we could make that magic happen. There's a new technology that will allow us to connect these things. And it's amazing what happens when you bring an imaginative technologist to the table. And it's powerful. So I recommend you consider having those people at the table, building the organizational structure so that the people who are responsible for technology are integrated well with all of the operating departments and divisions, that they're constantly in conversation with them, trying to find new ways to serve the business with technology. In other words, somebody who is constantly on the hunt for digital transformation possibilities. Those people have to have the right talent. Now, I know we're living in a world where there are 4 million open job requisitions for tech people. 4 million jobs that are not full. 600,000 or more are here in the United States. We need a lot of people. One of the challenges is that as we've moved to the cloud, The skills required have changed. We don't need the skills around running a server box as much as we need skills around applying software to a given business challenge. The skills that are needed, the talent that is needed, is an eclectic talent that brings together the business components with the technology components and gives you a well-rounded person who can make those interpretations, who can shepherd those digital transformations and make your modern cloud environment even better. So it's not as simple as going out and hiring, because that's not simple. It's defining and finding the right people to lead all of your digital transformation initiatives. And you're going to have a lot of them. Also examine the culture. Digital transformation usually engenders a cultural change, a cultural shift in a company. Culture is very hard to change. Very hard to change. Cultures evolve. And you can't just reach out and squeeze it and change the culture. You have to provide evidence that it's people in the organization to adopt new elements of the culture. In terms of a cloud enterprise, modern cloud enterprise, we've already seen examples of how the entire company needs to shift to a culture that is enthusiastic, that is proactive and participatory in all these new technologies. I'll give you the grand example, DevOps. DevOps does not involve just the development team and the operations team. It doesn't. In DevOps, the developers create software, they create code, they give it to the operators who would then deploy it and get the users started using it. The next thing they do is to quickly get as much feedback as they can from the users, bring that back to the developers who take that feedback and use it to create the next iteration of the software. That software is then given to ops, they deploy it to the users, they get the feedback back to the developers, and the cycle goes on and on. And if we're doing it right, we achieve continuous improvement of the software and therefore continuous improvement of the business functions it powers through continuous development, delivery, and deployment. If the users in every department of the company are not enthusiastic about participating in that process, that's where the process slows down. Oh, I don't have time to give you feedback today. Come back and see me tomorrow. I'm way too busy. You know, when operations get answers like that, DevOps breaks down. Had nothing to do with the operators. They did their job, or they're trying to do their job. Had nothing to do with the developers. They did their job. It had to do with other people in the organization. If you don't have everybody adopting the culture that results from modern cloud technologies and DevOps and all the things related to it, all the agile methodologies, it's very likely that it will not give you the results that you're looking for. And then finally, oh, that's good. That's supposed to say the right roadmap. I apologize. The font translation didn't go too well. Remember that the roadmap, by nature, is not cast in stone. You will start going in a particular direction, but as you develop, you're going to see new opportunities. New software will emerge. New technologies will emerge. You'll want to apply them. No reason not to. You have to manage the roadmap. You have to understand where you're headed in every case. But you and the roadmap will be a dynamic pair living together for a long time to come. And then finally, 5 from Cisco. Cisco says we're going to have unified experiences. Well, of course we are. The idea is that we bring everybody together, we bring applications together, we provide one common self-service portal, all of these different things vote confidence that everything will be available easily, readily, from one place. Why jump around from app to app? That may be easy for those of us who are deeply involved in technology. We're used to it. But a typical user doesn't do that day in and day out. So the easier we can make it for them, the better. I think they missed the ampersand in this one. I think they should be talking about security and resilience and compliance also. Security is a given. Every network that's involved in our cloud environment has to be secured. The connections between clouds has to be secured. The user connections, every endpoint must be secured. Everything. And then the data must be encrypted from when it's traveling to when it's at rest and storage, always encrypted, so that anybody stealing it, it's useless to them. This next one is a classic Cisco phrase, an empowering, connected, hybrid work experience. Well, of course. Of course, and of course. You know, we do everything we do to empower people to get their jobs done. If we don't, why not? Why do it? Why use the technology? So yeah, it's all about empowering people, definitely. And the fact is, if we're not connected, we're not a network. So yeah, of course it's connected. And then we get to hybrid. When they talk about hybrid work experience, they may be talking about working at home and working in the office. They may be talking about working on the public cloud, the private cloud, and on premises. They may be communicating with IPv4 and IPv6. They may be using a tablet that thinks it's a laptop or a laptop that thinks it's a tablet. Anybody remember that marketing phrase? But the point is that everything is hybrid. And that is the point. Everything is hybrid. We could get rid of that word. It's just by nature things are going to be hybrid. And it's absolutely okay. So yeah, an empowering, connected hybrid work experience. A reimagined application experience. Well, we're all moving to cloud native. And the resilience in cloud native means that if something goes wrong in the software, with old monolithic software, the whole application would collapse. With microservices, if a microservice fails, it's discarded and instantly reinstantiated. So it just marches on. Nobody even knows that there was a fault. And the software keeps running. It's that resilient. So yeah, a lot about applications are going to change. And then even on the user interface side, all of these other things, AI, ML, all the tools we have, you're going to see amazing applications that do things we have heretofore only dreamt of doing. And all of this will be part of a new, free, open source, API-first environment. Open source means everybody's working together to try to improve the software that we use. And that's powerful. Yes, there are companies that will support you and you pay them for that support. That's fine. But I think the most important point in this one is the presence of application programming interfaces, APIs. Now admit it. When you go looking at a new software service, let's say you're looking for a new UCaaS provider, how many of you first go to their integrations page before anything else? Now, I'll bet you that a lot of hands are up right now. A lot of us just go right to integrations to see what this software works well with. Because it's critical to all of us that everything work well together. Interoperability is necessary for the kind of converged environment we're all moving toward, especially in a modern cloud enterprise. So I think Cisco hit some very good points here, which finally bring me to the point where I'd like to bring it all together. Digital transformation and the modern cloud enterprise. Let's put them all together. First point, there's no longer anything on-prem. Ultimately, when we get to this place where we're conducting regular digital transformations every day, all the time, applying tech in new ways to solve new problems, it's very likely that nothing is going to be on-prem. You're not going to have to install anything or maintain anything or change anything. You're simply going to do it in software. You're going to request a resource. So I think that the ultimate modern cloud enterprise will have nothing left on-prem, except, of course, client devices. And yes, those of you who thought about subcutaneous, yeah, that's a possibility. Everyone will always be mobile. You talk about that hybrid working environment. Yeah, 2/3 of us want to work from home sometimes and at the office sometimes. So be it. Nothing wrong with it. As a matter of fact, it's great. Our technology should travel with us. It should be able to follow us. And so I see a time when everything becomes mobile. Zero trust is a must in a modern cloud enterprise. Remember that the big shift with zero trust is from being concerned with the IP addresses and the traffic patterns and the firewalls and all sorts of. Now we don't look at that nearly as much as we look at who is the user. Are they who they say they are? And the device they're using. Is that thing configured properly to work on our network? Is it secure enough as an endpoint? That's more of what Zero Trust focuses on. And with users all over the place, literally all over the place, that's critical. And also, the Secured Access Service Edge, SASE, basically the underlying strength of it is that it's all delivered as a service over the internet. There's no hardware deployment at a particular location. When everybody is mobile, that's a must. You can't have everybody carrying their own firewall. Well, you could, I guess, but why would you? So Zero Trust and SASE are an absolutely essential element in any effective, efficient modern cloud enterprise. If you haven't done that digital transformation, let that be the next one you do. We'll have to learn to coordinate our clouds. Those of us who used to do network integration, systems integration, are now deeply into the business of cloud integration, bringing different cloud services together so that users can use them all together effortlessly, transparently. Behind the scenes, we're making sure that everybody plays nicely together. But the user has one seamless, ongoing environment that they get their work done in. This means that if we are using multi-cloud, we are managing it properly. We're making sure that we're obeying everybody's rules, and we're creating no conflicts between different cloud service providers. It's sometimes tricky today. It'll be less tricky tomorrow. And I think everybody is working toward making themselves extremely accessible in the future multi-cloud standard world. As I emphasized before, all data must always be visible to you, well-managed, and completely protected. You're going to be investing a lot of time and effort and money into making this happen. Every penny will be worth it. Focus on that visibility. If you can see it, you can manage it. If you can see it and manage it, you can protect it. Everything ultimately will be delivered as a service. I don't think this should come as a surprise to anybody. We have so many different applications available as a service. We have ERP as a service, CRM as a service. We have Productivity Suite as a service. We have disaster recovery. Everything is available as unified communications. Everything is becoming available as a service, and eventually there'll be no reason to run any software locally. It'll be something you get from the cloud, and you connect into the cloud and you get the work, and that's it. There'll be utilities for enabling you to work in the unlikely event that you're disconnected. Even now we see that happen, but sometime in the near future, everything will be a service. We're also going to see the movement from monolithic big blocks of code down to little teeny microservices in containers, traveling wherever amongst the clouds they need to travel to get their job done. Eventually, all applications will be written in microservices. The constant question we should be asking ourselves is, how can I make this better with tech? If we're asking ourselves that constantly, we're inspiring new digital transformation initiatives that improve upon our modern cloud enterprise constantly. Constant improvement through constant digital transformation. But, and here's a forewarning, you have to remember, time and space will no longer exist. Yes, we're going to cause a disruption in the space-time continuum. Now, what I mean is that the time it takes to do something will no longer be so much of a core element of getting it done. Work will not be a 9 to 5 thing. You'll work when you need to work to get things done that you need to get done. And you'll work wherever you want to work. Even now, more and more people are experiencing placelessness. You know, you don't know where to. For example, you've been listening to me for almost an hour. I'll bet you don't know where I am, where I physically am. That's okay. It doesn't matter where I am. It matters that I'm connected, and you're connected, and we can learn from each other. So we're going to eliminate time and space. And with that, I will bring back the time and space master himself, John. Do you have any questions?
I think wherever you may be in the universe, Howard, yes, we have some people who are champing at the bit to ask you a couple questions. We don't have a ton of time. I want to remind the attendees, though, that we still do have some time. So if you have any questions, you can type them into the Q&A box at any time, and we'll do our best to get to all of them. This is one from Tom, and he says, in certain industries and countries, there will always be an on-prem infrastructure component or maybe a colo. Noticeably absent is any discussion of a hybrid cloud combining on-prem, private, and public cloud, I think it means from your presentation, and he's asking for your comment.
Well, first of all, you must have been out grabbing a cup of coffee when I talked about hybrid, Tom. Your name is very familiar. I think we may have worked together at one time when I was writing for Red Hat. I talked about the fact that that everything is hybrid. How many data centers do we know that are all on-prem anymore? None. How many do we know that are just using public cloud or just using private cloud? Very few. There may be some. But the reality is that most of us operate in a world that is a hybrid of private, public, and on-prem. That is a combination of IPv4 and IPv6. That is a combination of laptop and tablet. I mean, everything in our technology world is hybrid. So I'm voting confidence that we get rid of the word. Everything is hybrid. So nothing is hybrid. And as far as your comment about there will always be an on-prem infrastructure component, I don't think that that's a safe assumption. I'll disagree with you. You may be right. But to me, when you think about it, if you think that a router is an on-prem infrastructure component, okay, you're right. There'll always be an on-prem infrastructure component connecting you to the network so that you can use the resources on the other end. That's fine. You're right. There will always be that on-prem infrastructure component. I was really referring more to the servers and the storage, the things that we use directly to get things done. So yeah, I think we actually do agree that, you can tell me.
Okay. Let's see here. We've got here one from Key. How do you know when your company needs digital transformation? Kind of a
it does. It does.
Core question.
Good morning. It does. It just does. I don't. Wow. How do you know when it needs digital transformation? Look at everything you're doing. Sit at your desk for a moment and look at everything that everybody's doing. If you can think of one thing that somebody's doing that would be better done by technology, like is anybody collating? Is anybody sorting? Is anybody alphabetizing stuff? Those things can be transformed. Digital transformation sounds like it connotes something enormous, but it's not. It's not enormous at all. When you stopped going to the store to buy clothing and started shopping for it on Amazon, guess what? That was a digital transformation. It was, I guess, an inconsequential one, but you stopped something one way and started doing another way using technology. That's the definition of digital transformation. It's far simpler than people give it credit to be. So it is likely that every company in existence can benefit from some kind of digital transformation all the time. And it's not, if I've accomplished anything, I'd like to know that I conveyed to all of you that digital transformation is kind of like breathing. It's something we do all the time. We're constantly looking at things saying, hey, I could use some technology to do that. Let's do it faster and easier. That's digital transformation. So, the answer to your question is yes. It does. It needs it right now.
So, speaking of right now, I think that's all the time we have for here. Howard, thank you so much for a great presentation. We're going to take a short break, folks, and we'll be right back at the top of the hour for our second session, Best Practices for Preparing for a Cloud Transformation, led by Elias Knaser, Chief of Research at EK Media Group, and moderated by the driving force behind the editorial group, Converge 360, and our fearless leader, Gladys Rama. Many thanks to Howard M. Cohen for a great session, and to our sponsor, Nutanix, for making it possible. Now would be a great time to check out those extra resources on your console provided by our sponsors. Be sure to refresh your web page during the break to see the updated resources. And remember, during today's third session, we will be giving away a Surface Pro, Microsoft's iconic 2-in-1 device that combines the power of a laptop, the flexibility of a tablet, and everything in between. But you must be present to win, so stay tuned. Back in a few.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back. Thank you for sticking around for our second session. We have a great one for you, but before we get started, first I'd like to thank our sponsor today, Nutanix, for underwriting the summit and allowing us to bring you all of this great content. My name is Gladys Rama. I'm the editorial director here at Converge 360, and I'm so happy to welcome you to the second session of our summit called Best Practices for Preparing for Cloud Transformation. Our speaker today is Elias Knaser, Chief of Research at EK Media Group. Elias is a thought leader in the areas of cloud computing and digital disruption, and until recently, he was the research vice president at Gartner, where he spent 7 years focusing on private, hybrid, and public cloud. Today, Elias continues to conduct research and advise and engage customers and vendors on all aspects of cloud, edge, and data center transformation strategies. He's also well known for his ability to simplify complex technical concepts and explain how IT aligns with and advances business goals. Elias, take it away.
Well, thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you, everyone, for the opportunity. Today, I'm going to give you 10 of my favorite best practices for preparing for a cloud transformation. If you like this type of content, I also publish weekly, bi-weekly on my YouTube channel, so make sure you follow and subscribe there as well. So when I'm talking to customers, the number one thing that I advise that customers do as they're preparing for a cloud transformation is to ideate, develop, and communicate your organization's cloud strategy. Now, what does that mean? Well, what I'm saying here, what I'm talking about here, is we want to be able to document the cloud strategy, not just talk about it. We want to get everyone on the same page as far as cloud strategy is concerned. And the way to do that, you need to first ideate. Ideate means you need to talk to all of the right stakeholders. Now, when we're talking about stakeholders, you're going to ask, well, who are the stakeholders? Well, there are the stakeholders that are going to end up being responsible for documenting the cloud strategy. In some cases, that's a cloud architect, that's an enterprise architect, that's a business the cloud owner, that's your CIO, that's your executive sponsor. There's always this trinity of the person that is actually responsible for delivering the documents. And then there are the executive sponsor that will help facilitate, that will help explain why we're going to the cloud, talk about the business drivers, remove hurdles. And then you have your CIO, which in a lot of cases is also a facilitator, is the person that is going to initiate the project, is the person that is going to oversee the project. So the trinity of these three personas ends up writing the cloud strategy document. Now, the importance of the cloud architect, and I'm going to call them the cloud architect for the purposes of conversation, you can give them whatever title you like, is because the cloud architect is going to go through the organization, capture all of the ideas that are out there. That is the ideation phase of this conversation. You're going to make sure that everyone has a voice. Everyone is able to participate. Then you're going to move on to the development phase where you're taking all of these ideas and you're putting them on paper and you're coming up with a version 1. Now, here's what I'll say about that. You're never going to satisfy everyone, which is the importance of then communicating that version 1 of your strategy. Not a lot of people are going to agree, but everyone has to rally behind it. Your message here is going to be, folks, this is version 1. We're going to revisit this in 6 months, in a year maybe, and we will continuously update our cloud strategy. So we want to make sure we're able to take care of that. The second thing is we want to make sure that our cloud strategy answers the why. Why are we even going to the cloud? Because what you get out of this is you want to understand if this ends up being truly a business document or a technology document. If you find that IT, the cloud architect, and the CIO are writing this cloud strategy document, you're going to notice that your business drivers are going to include terms like scalability and availability and sustainability and BCDR and all of the terms, and all of these are important. But none of these are truly business drivers. So it's always important to understand that the cloud strategy document is a business document. This is where your executive sponsor is going to give you the business drivers. Now, in the earlier session, I can't help. I wanted to jump in and comment on some of the conversation that was happening there. Some of you were asking about digital transformation. Well, the importance here is if you are answering the why from a technical perspective, then you're answering the wrong way. You shouldn't be able to answer the why you're going to cloud. This is where your executive sponsor comes in. You shouldn't be able to answer when or why you're going to digitally transform. This is where the business is going to help you. The business is going to bring in a challenge of some sort that you are going to resolve via technology. I'm going to give you a small example here. My dad owns a restaurant. One of the challenges that he currently has is he has someone that has a temperature gun that goes through and grabs the temperature from all of his walk-in coolers and freezers twice a day. Well, that's good, but those temperatures are only good for about 20 minutes after you've taken them, after which, if within the time frame between temperature taking, if those freezers or coolers go down, well, you've lost a lot of money in terms of inventory. So what I did is I solved it by deploying sensors. I gave him a dashboard that shows him on a minute-by-minute basis what is the temperature of each of his walk-in coolers and freezers. What I did is I took something that he was doing manually and I digitized it. Right? So in this case, it was IoT. In your case, in this conversation, we're talking about cloud. But keep that in mind. You need the business to inform you. If you're trying to do it, then you're doing it wrong. Number 2 is create a skills and learning plan. So once you have a cloud strategy document, once you have something that you can reference, that you can refer to, now you need to understand, do I have the capabilities? Do I have the know-how? Do I have the certifications? Do I have the right people to implement this particular cloud strategy? Because now we're going to move from a business document and we're going to start building an implementation plan, an adoption framework. This is where your technical folks are going to come into play. This is why conducting a skills gap analysis across the organization to understand what types of certifications do we have? Who's done these types of projects before? What do we have out there, and how am I going to augment them? Do I need to send people to training? Do I need to get certifications? Certifications alone are good, but they're not enough. This is where we need to augment with hands-on experience. You can get hands-on experience in a variety of ways. As an organization, after someone finishes their certification, I believe that it is the responsibility of the organization, of the manager, the director, the VP, to constantly issue challenges, constantly issue assignments for your newly skilled engineers to go do things on the cloud, even if those aren't production things. But give them an assignment to go deploy containers or to configure serverless to do X, Y, or Z. These are ways to help them gain that hands-on experience. You can also always augment the team either through consultants or by hiring someone that's been there, done that, that will take the project and make it go faster. So certifications and hands-on becomes crucial. And then the other thing that we want to do moving forward is we want to create a skills transparency document. What that means is instead of telling folks, hey, I have a training budget, what types of training do you want to take? We want to tell them that, hey, these are the skills that are needed for our organization. Be very transparent. I need someone that understands cloud governance. I need someone that understands automation or orchestration. Be very clear in terms of if you want to stay within our organization for the next 5 years, these are the skills that matter. So don't go take a certification or a training class on something that is not important to us for the next 5 years. Now you're taking the initiative, you're giving them direction as far as what they need to take training on. Number 3, set up the framework for the CCOE. Now, we talked earlier about the Trinity, the folks that are going to build the cloud strategy document. Typically, there's the person that's responsible. We're calling them the cloud architect for the purposes of this discussion. But that cloud architect becomes the foundation for what will later become your cloud center of excellence. Again, there's some people that don't like CCOE, so whatever term you give the CCOE is fine, but here again, just because this is easier to understand. So what are the responsibilities of the CCOE? You're going to be doing a bunch of things. There's going to be a bunch of deliverables that come out of a CCOE. For example, it is your responsibility to put forth a cloud policy document. How are people within your organization allowed to use cloud? Can someone just take a credit card, swipe a credit card, get an AWS account or any other service? Without a cloud policy document, the answer is, sure, you didn't tell me not to do it, so I'm going to go ahead and do it. So one of the first things of a CCOE, or deliverables of a CCOE, is to put forth some kind of a cloud policy document that is then enforced, or you're helping to get it enforced through the executive sponsor, through the CIO that's initiating this project. You want to have an account governance policy, which means how many AWS accounts are you allowed to have? What is the criteria that would dictate creating an AWS account, or for that matter, an Azure subscription or an Azure account? There has to be some kind of a policy that says, these are the criteria that need to be met in order to create another account, because account governance is crucial for networking, for management, for automation, and it is very difficult to fix this after you've got account sprawl, so you want to make sure you get ahead of it as much as possible. Tagging strategy would be another deliverable of the CCOE. You want to enforce a policy that doesn't allow anyone to create any kind of an asset on the cloud without tagging it to a department, to a team, to something, so that at the end of the month, you're able to do a type of showback. You're able to run a report and say, the marketing team, you're responsible for 50% of the spend this month, and here are all of the assets that you're using. You accomplish this using a tagging strategy. Number 4, application assessment and migration plan. So again, as part of your cloud transformation, we want to make sure that we are assessing the applications. Which applications are even good candidates to go to the cloud? Which ones are we going to move? You probably have hundreds of applications. Where do you even start, right? Are you going to start at the most important applications, at the least important applications? Where do you begin? So having some kind of a method to assess these applications for whether or not they're even ready to move to the cloud becomes crucial. There are some tools that will help, but they'll only get you about 40, 50% of the way. You still have to do a lot of manual work on these applications. So getting that in the preparation phase is crucial. How will you migrate this application to the cloud? So first we assess which ones we know that are good candidates, but then we're going to have to decide how we're going to move it, right? Is this going to be a strict lift and shift? We're going to just move it from point A to point B. Are we going to refactor it? We're going to change some of its components. Is it a complete re-architecture? Are we going to rebuild it? Are we going to replace it with a SaaS? All of these have to be done on an application by application basis. And then do we need to do a proof of concept on these applications? So do we need to deploy them in the public cloud for a period of time and figure out some of the quirks, what's working, what's not working, how much is it costing really, how much is it, etc. All of these things, again, need to be hashed out early on in the process. Cloud strategy and cybersecurity posture integration. So it's crucial as you're building your cloud strategy to also make sure that you have a good integration with your cybersecurity strategy. You want to make sure that you're adhering to all of the security best practices. You want to make sure that the security team is involved in this, that they're able to account for cloud security as part of their overall security posture. Identity and access management becomes crucial, whether it's a single sign-on or how you're going to access not just multiple public clouds like AWS, Azure, and Google, but also the multiple SaaS applications that you have access to. So IAM becomes really important. You want to make sure that you have a continuous audit and assessment capabilities as well as you're moving towards that. So you also want to make sure that you're preparing for that as well. Selecting your management tools in the preparation phase, this is important because the tools that you're going to buy, you're kind of stuck with them. So if you're buying tools and you decide that you're going to be in a single cloud, but then 6 months later, suddenly you make an acquisition or something happens and there's a second cloud provider and the tools that you've just invested in don't work for that secondary provider, or maybe they don't match, they don't have feature parity with the second cloud provider, then you've got a challenge, right? So you want to make sure that you're selecting the right management tools ahead of time. You're preparing and you're making the right decisions for single versus multi-cloud ahead of time. We want to decide early on, are we going to start with the native tools or are we going to be using third-party tools? This conversation will overlap also with single versus multi-cloud. That has implications between the two as well. And then we want to decide how we're going to approach cost optimization, because regardless of what anyone says, cost is still one of the biggest conversations that we have in cloud. And if there's any place that I would highly recommend that you invest in a third-party tool, it would be cost optimization. The value, what you're getting back from that perspective is going to be fantastic. So I would highly recommend that you invest in a third-party tool that gives you cost optimization across multiple clouds. 7, design a self-service user experience. This is important. Your users are used to going to an AWS. They're used to going to a web portal, swiping a credit card and getting access to the resources that they need. In order for you to transition them, in order for you to be able to control that experience, you want to be able to design a self-service user experience that consolidates everything they need through that portal. So you have to be able to consolidate the resources they want from AWS, from Azure, from their SaaS applications. All of that has to be consolidated in a single location that becomes a sort of bottleneck where everyone goes through that helps you control the spend, helps you control how people are using it, and also identifies some of the challenges that they're having. So make sure you give them that type of self-service user experience. You also want to be able to control shadow IT. Without giving them that same user experience that they're getting from the major cloud providers, you're going to have a lot of resistance. So while you want to take something away, give them something that's just as good. And this is where self-service will definitely shine. As you're going through self-service, you're going to notice that you're going to need a lot of automation, orchestration on the back end. This is where we go back to the skills conversation we talked about earlier, that transparency list and highlighting the need for the skills that you're going to require as you're building your cloud transformation. Number 8, I'm going to say don't ignore core infrastructure. This is something that a lot of customers will ignore as they're thinking about cloud transformation. What that means is, how are we going to connect to the cloud? Is it going to be just over the internet? Are we going to have dedicated private connections? Are we going to use express routes and direct connects? And are we going to move potentially into co-location facilities and use interconnects? How are we going to connect? How many different resilience connectivities are we going to need? So addressing the network remains important as you're going to the cloud. As you're thinking about cloud transformation, this also brings us to a question that someone in the earlier session asked about hybrid. Network is a big part of hybrid, but there's always going to be some kind of infrastructure on-prem, so you want to remember the core infrastructure. We want to not forget about things like DNS and DHCP and Active Directory, because those are going to be, you have to think about how you're going to deploy those in a hybrid manner. You're going to have some kind of infrastructure on premises for the foreseeable future. So how are we going to do a hybrid DNS and DHCP? How are you going to deploy Active Directory? Are you going to deploy domain controllers in every one of your cloud providers? What happens to your FSMA roles when you do that? Are you going to use Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, or traditional enterprise Active Directory? There's a lot of things that you have to consider when you're looking at your core infrastructure. And I'm going to put something in here that maybe doesn't belong in here, but I have to highlight data protection and backup. Folks, it's your data. You are responsible for the data. Don't just say that, I'm going to a Microsoft 365, Microsoft offers backup, so I'm just going to rely on their backup. They will back up your information, your data. But what you need to be looking at is, will they be able to restore your data in a meaningful, timely manner? So look at the T's and C's. You are responsible for your data, so make sure you have a backup strategy across the board, from IaaS, PaaS to SaaS. It is going to be your responsibility should an outage happen at any time. This one is important. Your ecosystem is your differentiator. And in the earlier session, someone also brought up Colo, so I'm going to talk about Colo here a little bit extensively. As part of your cloud transformation, you want to be looking at cloud adjacency. What does cloud adjacency mean? Cloud adjacency allows you to bring your workloads adjacent to the clouds, but not necessarily put them in the clouds. So you might have workloads that are not good candidates for the cloud, like an AS400, maybe some Unix systems. Those you're not going to put in the cloud, but you can bring them adjacent to the cloud, so close to the cloud that you're within a fiber cross-connect. You're looking, in some cases, depending on the region and where that you're taking services, you're looking at sub-millisecond latency. I mean, that is LAN-like speed. That's in the same data center to AWS, to Azure, to Google, etc. So the importance of having a colo or moving your core from your on-premises, wherever it is, into a co-location of sorts, is it gives you adjacency not only to the cloud providers, because most of these cloud providers have a presence within these colo providers, but it also gives you access to a lot of other providers in the ecosystem, Salesforce, CDNs like Akamai and others, the futures exchanges, the financial exchanges. You now have the ability to very easily interconnect to multiple providers. So at the end of the day, when you look at your infrastructure, it is going to be a combination of ecosystem interconnects that you are building over time. Your ecosystem becomes your differentiator. So make sure that you're able to configure your core in such a way to take advantage of the ecosystem that is being set up. Sustainability is becoming a very important topic for all organizations. In what better way to make your organization more sustainable, more climate change friendly, so to speak, if we can say that, by connecting to ecosystem partners that are already sustainable by default, that are already taking the same posture for sustainability. So by you interconnecting and using them as a service, you are increasing how much your organization is taking sustainability importantly from that perspective. Last but not least, what I'm going to say here is create KPIs and a metrics scorecard. The importance of creating KPIs is it's your ability to measure the progress, the success that you're making on this cloud transformation. All of the things that we mentioned in these 9 best practices up until now, it can be measured. So did you create a cloud policy document? If so, that is a KPI. You can measure that. You can put it on some kind of a metrics scorecard that you can then show to your CIO, you can show to your executive sponsor, that you can brief the rest of the team. How many applications did you assess? How many applications have you migrated? All of these things you can create KPIs from and create a really nice dashboard that shows the progress of your cloud transformation. So as you're going down this journey, don't forget to reward yourself and reward the team and enjoy the little things. Enjoy your little wins, right? You want to make sure that you're constantly making sure that everyone understands that they're doing a good job, that you're rewarding them, and that you're able to show it. So make sure that you're creating these KPIs and these metrics scorecards. And my last advice to you here, I'm going to quote myself. Your goal is to make technology and business indistinguishable. There should no longer be an IT team. You are the business. Moving forward in this digital transformation era, you are the differentiator. Everything that you're doing is going to put your business, is going to give your business the competitive edge, the competitive advantage it needs to differentiate itself from the competition. So your goal is to make business and technology indistinguishable. I hope I gave you a lot of best practices. Anxious to see what you guys have from a questions perspective. And with that, I'll give it back to the moderator.
Thanks so much, Elias. Great presentation. A lot of good guidance for our audience members here. Before I turn it to the audience for their questions, I kind of wanted to pick your brain for a couple of minutes on a couple of the points that you touched on. Just speaking from, an editor, as we've talked to other editors, and I have talked to a lot of our readers in interviews, as well as other companies trying to navigate the cloud, modernizing for the cloud age in their own enterprises. And one of the things that comes up a lot is how they go about convincing, how IT pros go about convincing C-level execs, for example, to really take cloud transformation seriously, to throw a lot of resources into transforming their systems. What kind of advice would you give to IT pros that are in that boat, trying to, get some higher level executive backing for cloud transformation projects?
That's an awesome question. Thank you for that question. So the first thing I'm going to say is it's not an easy task, but it is not something that anyone should shy away from. I say it's not an easy task because although if you take a step back, it's not really on IT to convince anyone. Right? The business should be chasing you, but the business doesn't know what they don't know. So we need to help them a little bit. So whoever is going to have that passion, whoever is going to be responsible for that cloud transformation, before you have a cloud architect or you appoint a cloud architect, there's usually someone within the organization that believes in this, that wants to see it happen, that has a vision. That person's job is to evangelize. You're going to need to talk to a lot of executives. Now, when you're talking to executives, my advice to you is don't try to sell them on cloud, right? What you need to do is let them tell you where the organization is going in the next 5 years. What are some of the transformational things that we can expect to see in the next 5 years? Let them talk in business terms. So if you're a retailer, and you're talking to the executive sponsor, they might be talking about things like, hey, we've got these grocery stores that we own, and we want to put sensors in all of them so that someone with an application can have an augmented reality experience of some sort. While they're talking about that from that perspective, these are the things they know. In your brain, you're trying to translate that into what you would need to build that experience for them. So what you want is for them to tell you where the business is going and for you to then translate that into technology. And I say it's not easy because first, sometimes they don't want to talk to you. They won't give you the time of day. This is where you have to be persistent. You want to constantly be able to talk to them, to evangelize to them, to give them ideas, to show them maybe where the competition or what the competition is doing. So plant small ideas in their mind. And if possible, take them to conferences. Take them to conferences where they can meet their counterparts and see what's going on. And again, my former employer here, I don't mean to give Gartner an advertisement here, but they do have conferences that are great for CIOs and for C-level executives, where you can go and have them interact, because that will come up with ideas. They'll see what's going on. They'll come back and say, hey, how can we do this? All you need is to get that one person to be excited to understand the value of what you can offer them, that person that understands that business and technology must be indistinguishable, and you're off to the races. So it'll take some time, but you can get there. Right.
Great advice. And it's not, from what I'm hearing from you, it sounds like if you pin it on the point about showing them what the competitors are doing, that's a great one. And it also certainly it points to ways that money, profitability can improve. Just tying it to like those sorts of businessy kind of practical benefits for the company. I think that's really solid advice there.
Yep.
Yeah. And another question, kind of a tangent, but so the environment that we're in now, a lot different than how it was before 18 months ago, 2 years ago. Is there a difference, do you think, in how you should be approaching cloud transformation now versus if it was like 2019? Or, is it just about the basics are the same?
Yeah, great question. So what we learned from the pandemic is the pandemic accelerated cloud transformation and cloud adoption. See, those folks that didn't believe in the cloud or were hesitant or were slow to go to the cloud paid a certain price when the pandemic hit. Why? It wasn't because they didn't have a good on-premises infrastructure. They had a great one. The challenge they had was a supply chain one. The challenge they had was they couldn't even get into their data center to rack, stack, and scale. Those that were already in the cloud scaled very quickly, digitally transformed very quickly, gave access, didn't have the business interruption that they had. So if we're seeing anything from the pandemic on, it's an acceleration of cloud transformation and cloud adoption. We are also seeing that customers are a lot more, they're savvier today than they were in 2019. They're asking all the right questions. They're not just jumping into cloud and kind of winging it. They're taking the time to build a cloud strategy, to do a proper application assessment, to understand what they should put in the cloud and what they shouldn't. But if there's one takeaway that I would say, it would be acceleration of cloud.
Definitely. It's funny you say that now. It's funny that we're having this conversation today, specifically because there was just an IDC report, I think, just today or yesterday that said that shows cloud spending is set to overtake non-cloud spending for the first time this year. Does that bear out in what you're seeing in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of organizations that's been happening for a while. I think if the IDC report is showing that we're at an inflection point, I think that was going to happen at some point. Going back to the conversation that was happening earlier in the earlier session, I don't think we're ever going to not have on-premises infrastructure, but it is certainly going to shrink. And as it shrinks, the cloud spend is going to increase, and that is manifesting itself in IDC and other researchers' reports as well. So I'm not surprised to see that. At one point, I'm sure it'll stabilize, but a lot of organizations are also worried about what's next, right? So we went through this pandemic. Hopefully, we'll never see anything like it again. But should we see something like it, are we prepared? What if what we see is going to be different? Are we prepared? So everyone is also taking out a sort of insurance policy to make sure that they're ready for whatever could potentially come next.
Right. Yeah, definitely good to keep in mind, not just recent events, but, future similar events as well that can disrupt businesses in a similar way. Yeah, I had another question for you, Elias, before I turn it to the audience. Something that comes up again in a lot of the conversations we have with other companies that are, looking to undergo modernization, digitization projects is, at what point is it not something that they can do in-house? Like, I guess I'm saying is, at what point is it time to just throw your hands up and say we need to outsource this cloud transformation project that we have, or do we sign up a partner? Do we seek help directly from the vendors if we have a contact with within Microsoft or AWS? What do you say to IT teams that are trying to gauge at what point do they invest money and resources and time partnering up for their cloud transformation project?
Yeah, great question. So that is where that skills gap analysis or assessment that we talked about earlier will come into play. When you do a proper skills gap assessment, you're going to realize, do I have the right skills in-house to do this? If the answer is yes, do I have the capacity? Do these people have the capacity, and do I have to move them to a dedicated team and then backfill? So there's some shuffling that would have to go around in order to enable these folks to be able to go faster, to deploy faster. If the answer is, well, yes, we have in-house capabilities, then my advice would be to separate them and then potentially backfill or not, and you move forward. If the answer is, well, we have some experience, we have some capabilities, then you have options. You either are going to bring in a partner to help you get through the transformation, get through the migration. That has pros and cons, because the partner is going to help you get through, but then day two is on you. And if you don't have the skills, you're kind of back to the same square one, basically. So what we've seen is a lot of organizations, what they're doing is they're either hiring, and the challenge with hiring today is it's hard to find the right resources. So you have the capital, you have the recs, you're able to hire, but you can't find the right people to hire. So you end up going to either a managed service, some kind of an outsourcer, some kind of a consulting company to help you not just get through the project, but also maintain or a longer contract. The trick there, and my recommendation, is if you're going with a longer term contract, you also have a decision to make. Part of the contract should be that there should be a knowledge transfer. So not just, hey, we're going to take care of this, don't worry about it. No, you're going to take care of this, but you're also going to train our existing engineers because at some point we want to end this contract. Or you decide, especially if you're already outsourced. So if you already have an outsourcing agreement with an organization, then a lot of folks will just add cloud on top of that, and that just becomes the way that they're operating. But going to a third party is important to it's important to realize that early on in the project. Because so here's the thing, if you don't have the right skill sets, if you don't have the right mindset, your transformation, your migration is going to be flawed. A lot of folks are going to use all of the best practices that they've had on premises and apply them in the cloud. I'll give you an example. If you're not fluent in cloud and you're trying to move something as basic as you have a farm of 20 web servers and you're trying to move it to the cloud, you're just going to V2V, right? You're going to take those 20 virtual machines and move them to Azure or AWS. But someone that knows how to use the cloud is going to move those, create an auto-scaling group, create 3 or 4 servers, then create the right automation, and only deploy resources as those resources are needed and remove resources when those resources aren't needed. And as a result, you have now tweaked that workload. If you don't have the right experience with cloud, you've got a load balancer on premises, Citrix, NetScaler, and maybe an F5, you're going to simply move that from point A to point B. But someone that understands the cloud is going to use the Azure load balancer or the AWS ELB, and you've automatically optimized for price, but you've also optimized for operations. You're no longer responsible for maintaining, for scaling, all of that. So the way you migrate will have a significant impact on whether or not your project is successful.
Great information. Thanks for letting me pick your brain and selfishly take away some of your time from audience questions. Although we have a bunch of audience questions, and I'm going to get to them now. Here we have one from Jordan. Elias, can you expand a bit more on what you said earlier? Your ecosystem is your differentiator.
Yeah, I think the ecosystem is going to become crucial as we move forward. And you heard, again, from the previous speaker about the importance of the fact that, hey, you're going to be using a lot of as-a-service capability. You're pretty much going to be getting everything that you need as a service from the cloud. Let's not say everything, you're going to get a majority, right? So as you use more and more as a service, what you want to make sure is that you're able to easily connect to these services and have the best user experience possible. So as you're connecting to 4, 5, 6, 10 plus as a service, you are now creating your own ecosystem of partners that you're connecting to. Those partners, this ecosystem becomes the infrastructure that you rely on to move your application forward, to move your business forward. So that's what I mean by the ecosystem. The ecosystem is that collection of as a service and others that you subscribe to, that you use, that form your organization's ecosystem. And the way to achieve that is you want to go to a location that allows you these easy interconnects. These are typically co-location facilities. Now, co-location facilities have evolved. In the past, there used to be a place where you can go, you can get a cage, and you can deploy your hardware. Today, you go there, you can still do that, and that has its own benefits, but now you can also take advantage of the fact that you can connect to Salesforce easily. You can connect to Azure easily, to AWS easily, to Akamai easily. You can leverage storage as a service because Dell or Hitachi or whoever, or Nutanix has an as a service in one of these services. You can connect to that and take advantage of it. So you're positioning yourself, you're positioning your organization to very easily leverage the ecosystem.
Great. We have another question here from Jared. And you touched on this earlier, Elias, but maybe a bit more. Jared requires, a couple more details. He says, Where do I acquire the cloud skills needed?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? Where are the cloud skills needed?
Where do I acquire the cloud skills needed?
Yeah. So cloud skills can be acquired in a variety of ways, right? So you can acquire cloud skills by taking training. And there's a ton of training online, there's in person. So those are definitely the first place that you would go for this training. Cloud training can also be, now that conferences are back and hopefully everyone gets a chance to attend these conferences, a lot of the conferences will have hackathons. I would highly recommend that you attend these hackathons. Those are incredible learning experiences that allow you to jumpstart kind of what you're doing. You also have access to the free tier of a lot of these cloud providers. Organizations that are savvy will start to assign their newly certified cloud engineers assignments. Hey, go build a free tier application with a load balancer in multiple regions. So those are hands-on experiences that you're gained because someone is telling you to go do something in a proof of concept. So collectively, that builds upon your experience.
Right. Great call about the hackathons. I think people tend to forget that when they go to conferences, go to live events, and the hackathon gets, bumped a little bit to the side when people are trying to plan their conference schedules. But yeah, great reminder about that. Here's a question from John. Why is an account governance plan important?
So the account governance is important because it is the foundation of pretty much everything that follows. So without a good account governance plan, what ends up happening is you create multiple accounts. And those multiple accounts are fine. They're going to meet your needs. They're going to get the job done. That's cool. But what people don't realize is these multiple accounts will have an implication on, for example, how you design the network. How are you going to connect to all of these accounts? How are you going to manage all of these accounts? How are you going to enforce security across all of these accounts? What you also don't want to end up having is account sprawl, where, at one point there was a theory that every application should have its own separate AWS account or Azure subscription. And what that led was, for some organization ended up with thousands of subscriptions and thousands of accounts. That was incredibly difficult to manage. So what you want to do is have the right amount of accounts, the right number of subscriptions, so that you simplify networking management, you simplify operational management, and you simplify security management as well. So, for example, you could have an account that consolidates all of your security tools, all of your security best practices. You build your IAM strategy in there, and then you are pairing with all of these other accounts. You could have a shared account that will have shared services in it, Active Directory, your monitoring, all of the things that everyone else is going to need can be in a shared services account. And then maybe you break up the other accounts based on departments. So maybe the accounting department is going to have its own account. Maybe the marketing department is going to have its own account, or you break it up by production and test. Production is going to have a separate account. Test is going to have a separate account. Dev will have a separate account. But you have to have a strategy, some way to organize all of these different resources to understand how you're going to organize them, but more importantly, how you're going to manage them as well.
Great. And before I get to the next question, a real quick reminder to the audience, please do throw your questions for Elias into the box there on your console. And if you don't have time to get to it, we'll make sure Elias gets your question, and then he can reach out to you after the session is over. But I want to make sure everyone knows that, just throw your questions in there. We'll get to it somehow, some way. All right, next question from Karen. What kinds of business drivers should I include?
Yeah, business drivers are going to be tricky. Every business driver is going to be, every organization is going to have different business drivers. Rarely will you see the same business drivers for everyone. What I don't want you to do is I don't want your cloud strategy document to look like every other cloud strategy document that I've reviewed, meaning every other cloud strategy document will have availability as a business driver. We'll have scalability as a business driver. We'll have elasticity as a business driver. And when you take a step back and you look at all of these things, well, they're great, but all of these are sort of IT initiatives, right? You are responsible for availability. The business doesn't care. Yes, it's important, but hey, they expect availability. So figure it out, whether it's on premises or in the cloud, you are responsible for availability. You are responsible for scalability. So great, but is that a business driver? So business drivers should be things like, maybe it's time to market. Maybe your organization is an organization that does a lot of acquisitions. So I used to work with an insurance company whose sole reason for existence was to acquire and consolidate smaller insurance companies. Okay, so for that organization, the importance is I am acquiring a new company 2 or 3 times a month, right? How am I going to take their existing infrastructure and very quickly fold it into my infrastructure? In the past, they would just send them new infrastructure to deploy on there that makes it uniform, and they would get rid of their old infrastructure. Today, what they would do is they would probably get rid of the infrastructure and migrate them into whichever cloud provider that they're using. That means that you're going to fold them into the right region for a particular cloud provider or multiple cloud providers for that matter. So your ability to do that using cloud services is significantly enhanced. So that time to market becomes an important business driver for you. Another business driver could be that you are looking to deploy sensor-based data. Sensor-based data, because our organization is trying to gather real-time information and react to it in real time. Maybe you're Domino's Pizza and you're trying to invest in self-driving cars for delivery purposes, right? That is a business driver. Domino's wants to reduce the reliance on humans, finding humans to drive a car and deliver a pizza, right? That's their business driver, is to digitize that entire process. Your job is to figure out how you're going to take that sensor information that is being generated from all these cars and run the right analytics against it. How long is it taking for a car to get from point A to point B? Are there any analytics that we can learn from here? Can we improve the algorithm? How long is it taking for someone to grab the pizza when the window is opening and we're giving them the pizza, right? So all of these things become your responsibility. That is the business driver that you're going after. So the most important thing is to first understand the nature of the business that you're in. What is my business? And how is my business going to need to digitally transform? This is, again, where your executive sponsor, if you're doing this correctly, your executive sponsor is writing the business drivers. So remember, we talked about the trinity of the stakeholders that are going to be responsible for delivering the cloud strategy document. In the cloud strategy document, the section that is business drivers, your executive sponsor should be contributing, if not writing, that entire section, because you don't know what it is. You're not supposed to know what it is. You need someone to tell you what that is. Your job is to then translate it.
Great. Then next, I really like this question from Nilesh because I see it, reflected in a lot of cloud computing surveys as a concern, as a particular concern among enterprises. And Nilesh asks, how do you plan, design, and build a cloud-agnostic solution without getting tied to a cloud provider or getting caught in a cloud provider lock-in situation? I think that's what he's asking.
Yeah, I'm going to be the only person on the planet that gives you the honest to God answer, which is you don't. If we're being very honest, there is one way to avoid lock-in, and that one way is to reduce your cloud use to infrastructure as a service component. And what I'm talking about here is virtual machines, containers, and data. Now, what you end up with virtual machines, containers, and data is they're very portable. You can very easily move everything from AWS to Azure to Google to Oracle and back very quickly. You simply need to replicate, and however long it takes to replicate those, you're able to move them. But by doing that, you're also invalidating the whole value proposition of why you're going to cloud in the first place. You are going to cloud in the first place for all of the value-added capabilities that the cloud offers. If you are simply looking for a hosting environment, then I would say you don't even need the cloud. Find a co-location provider that has presence in all of the geos that you're interested in. Deploy VMware, deploy Kubernetes, deploy whatever you need, and bada bing, bada boom, you don't need the cloud. You're going to the cloud for all of the PaaS capabilities that the cloud offers. I would say don't be afraid of being locked into the cloud. You already have lock-in today. If you look at your on-premises environment, pick whatever you want. You're locked in with Oracle, you're locked in with VMware, you're locked in with Microsoft, whichever one you want. But you accept it to be locked in with these providers because Oracle makes a heck of a database. VMware makes a heck of a virtualization platform, and so on and so forth. So lock-in is not bad. It is just a matter of how much time do you need to exit. So the question here is about exit. So if you have regulators that are saying you need to have an exit strategy, great. Your first question to them is, how much time do I have? If they tell you, well, I want you to be able to exit the cloud provider in 3 days, then I'll tell you that the only way that you can go into the cloud is via IaaS. Containers, VMs, data, because you can easily exit in 3 days, again, depending on the size of your data. If they tell you, hey, you've got a year to exit, then I can say that you can pretty much exit anything in a year, right? So if you're locked in with AWS at a PaaS level, and they've given you a year to exit, then it'll be time-consuming, it'll be operationally challenging, it'll be costly, but you can exit that cloud provider. Then the other question is, why do you want to exit? Like, what are you worried about? And that takes us down a different conversation. Are you worried about AWS going offline? Are you worried about all of AWS going offline or a single region within AWS? So there are ways to mitigate this. It's a big topic, but I would say don't be afraid of being locked in. Leverage the lock-in to your advantage. And if you truly don't want to be locked in, then you're looking at bare bones, IaaS, VMs, containers, data, you can do portability. If you're trying to ask, if the question was, hey, can I use like a third party to kind of abstract everything? You could. I mean, there's a lot of software that would allow you to do that. But then you're locked in with the third party that you're using to abstract. So the question is, do you want to be locked in with that smaller third party, or do you prefer to be locked in with AWS? And if you do abstract everything, then you're back in infrastructure mode because you are now responsible for scaling and maintaining this new platform that you've created to deploy across the board. Which brings us back to there's really no way to avoid the lock-in, and lock-in isn't necessarily bad.
Right. Great insight, Elias. Thank you so much for the presentation, for answering the audience questions as well as my own nosy questions. I really appreciate it. And that's it. That's all the time we have for session 2. Thank you so much, Elias, and for everyone attending.